Now, we are heading south to Techion, where we will be joined shortly by a man who will share probably last Saturday night's results with me. But basically, we're going to talk about a couple of different topics. But this press release come across my desk and caught my attention. Particularly, there's a lot of stories and documentaries around our antibiotic resistance in humans being on the rise and something of great concern. So is drench resistance in our sheep. The consumer is demanding that we have antibiotic-free meat, and we cannot keep putting the drench down our sheep's throats and being able to avoid what is now being proven through this survey as a very large problem. $48 million a year it is costing the industry. And joining us now is Managing Director for Techion, Greg Mirams. Good evening, sir. Do you share my gloating on the rugby to start with?
Hey, Sarah, and look, absolutely, what a game. And to finish it in that manner, I think just made it all the more special. And the fact that the South won was pretty cool. And that was 2 games in a row for the South. The last one was at Carisbrook, of course, to help out Otago Rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. And they certainly needed it at the time and have turned things around a lot, which is fantastic. Let's talk about it. We're going to talk about a few things here, a few stories out featuring your wonderful agri-tech company. Tell us about how FECPAK came about, the technology, about animal parasite technology, and where that's sort of leading towards doing a survey around drench resistance.
Well, look, Sarah, it already began. I mean, my background is in farming and farm systems. And when we look at animal production and performance, nutrition's number one. You got to feed your animals first. The thing that'll rob you and destroy your commercial success after that will be if you have disease in the animals. And the major disease that we deal with is parasites. And they'll take growth rates, lambs doing sort of 220, 240, 250 grams a day, and they'll halve them if you have an undetected parasite problem in there. So it's a big issue. And our only recourse, in fact, when I was younger, I was basically employed to drench lambs every 3 weeks, just routinely treat them. And what that's done is we did that even if we didn't know if they needed to be treated, we just did it routinely. And consequently, we're now striking major problems where the drugs we were using and relied on to take that approach are not working, and they're failing to a really concerning degree. And we're now seeing farms that are losing production and productivity, and they have very few options left. So the story around where we come from and our involvement is really around taking an invisible problem and making it visible. If farmers... if I use this analogy, Sarah, if they spray some gorse and then 3 months later it starts to green up, then they're on the phone to the helicopter company or the spray company, something's gone wrong, they've invested a lot of money and the gorse is greened up. That's exactly the same issue, cost them more money if they're using drugs that don't work. The only difference is they can't see it. And so when they see the stuff is failing and they realize that this is what it can cost you, all of a sudden you get that whole change in the approach, and all of a sudden they're making more money because the animals are growing and they're not buying drugs that don't work.
It's a really hard thing too, because a lot of diseases are subclinical, and so therefore you've got to kind of be a bit of a mind reader and to predict that, particularly with climatic changes and also trying to put weight on them quickly.
Yeah, well, speed's everything. The quicker we grow these animals, the more money you generally make, the less carbon footprint you have, the more you can do. So that's the secret of profitability, is high performance and low cost. For us, as I said, if you have subclinical parasitism going on, if you've treated these things but you've only killed 50% of the worms, the other 50% is still holding that growth rate back, and consequently, they take longer to kill and all those other things. And there's been many studies, which is what you would have read in the press release, that have shown the cost of the subclinical or unseen production loss. But most farmers aren't aware it's happening. By the time they see that there is an issue, the drugs have been failing for years. And so the plea for us is to go out and actually understand what drugs work on your farm and what ones don't, because it's a fundamental part of the information we need to just use drugs that work and avoid stuff that's not working.
It is a really hard place to navigate, though, as well, because every year in season is very different, and veterinarians are a lot of source of information, and of course, a great salespeople for that as well. So how would you suggest utilising your technology like FECPAK to be able to make those more informed on-farm decisions?
So look, the key for us is that none of us are as smart as all of us. Our ideal situation is that if we're working with a veterinarian and their client, what we can bring is that diagnostic information and technology to make that easier and cheaper and more accessible. Then we can make smarter decisions. It's actually not a hard thing once we have the information. For the issue of drug resistance, this is a permanent issue. We can't reverse this issue. So when you have drug failure, it's permanent. And we've got farms, and some of them were quoted in that story, where they have got fundamental and catastrophic breakdown of drugs, and their animals, we're getting deaths. They can't control the parasites. And so people all the time say to me, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll get a new drug. We'll they'll come out with a new one." And look, I work really closely with these companies internationally, and the latest estimates on cost is somewhere between $200 and $2.6 billion to produce a new anthelmintic drug for anti-parasitic worms. Now, we are not going to see that. I do not expect us to see that sort of investment. It takes 15 years to do. The patent cost is huge. So we have what we have, and we need to look after that, and we need to be using drugs that work. And as you said right early on, Sarah, the reality is that our taste pure nature story that we talk about our animals in our marketplace, in our supply chains, we're seeing more of this issue around transparency, what's going into our food that we eat. It just makes sense to understand what drugs are working and avoid the ones that aren't. It just makes sense on so many levels. What we just need to do is encourage farmers, don't have this problem stealing from you. You just got to test and find out. It's not that expensive relative to your investment in drenching. And we've had farmers that have, as you saw in the stories, completely turned their business around by realising that the reason their lambs aren't performing is because they were using drugs that don't work.
I'm just reading here, the final word rests with the Central Otago farmer who, after looking for answers for 18 months, has recently confirmed his property is resistant to all drenches except one, is what he found out. He's too scared to try and work out the costs of the wastage, the death rate, the loss of productivity and weight gain failure. Let's move on to the other story. It's what a treat having two stories in 1 week. Around the technology of Fitpack, which is an animal parasite diagnostic system. How is this being used to potentially collect data and track more than 30 human diseases?
Yes, Sarah, this is an evolution of our business. We obviously, I started the first FECPAK back in 1992, long time ago. And what's occurred is that as the evolution of cloud computing and imaging technology, we evolved from teaching farmers to use microscopes to look down to count parasite eggs in their fecal samples. And we've now we don't have to do that anymore. We can prepare a sample and put it into an electronic device, and that uploads images to the internet cloud. And from there, we can analyze them from all over the world. So it's been totally transformational for us as a business, because we are now a borderless diagnostic company, and we build this technology. We send it all over the world. As I said earlier on, 95% of it goes offshore, farms all over the world. And what's happened is that we have realised that we've actually got more technical capability with this technology that we've developed in the sheep industry than we have in the human parasite issue. Now, 25% of the world population have chronic parasites, and they operate very, very similar to parasites in sheep and cattle and dogs, and they pass eggs into the feces. That's how we measure them. The drugs they use is very similar. They've got drug resistance developing in humans. And so this whole area is fascinating, because it's this concept of what's called One Health. One health being, actually, there's not much difference between us and animals when it comes to disease and drugs. And if you look at COVID as an example, I mean, there it is. We are closely linked to other animals in terms of those diseases. So if we've developed technology that works in animals, can we use it in humans? And where these problem areas are, they don't have hospitals and they don't have laboratories. So for us to have a point of care, deployable technology that we can send into the middle of an Ethiopian rural community and be able to test the calves, the kids, the goats, all through the same system and be able to measure disease is pretty cool. So that's that whole evolution of what's happening. And we're pretty excited by it because, as I said, it's a real story of emerging out of New Zealand sheep industry and now being used in human health. So yeah, it's kind of cool for us.
Oh, every time I talk to you, Greg, I get so inspired about what you've created over so many years. It's absolutely inspiring. Can you work on the COVID test that has to go right down the back of your nose and through your throat? I had that on Friday. I can say my results were texted to me and I'm fine. Hence the nasal tonight. My apologies, everybody. But I mean, if I could just put that into my phone, do it from home and not have to feel like a leper in the car park with the lady in the has cams, we're getting there, aren't we? We can keep a track of our own health.
It's coming, Sarah. It's genuinely coming, and I mean, we hear a lot about vaccines in the media. And look, who knows when we're going to see those? The quickest vaccine I think in history was over 2 years, and that was for mumps, I think, and that's over 2 years. So if they're going to crack it in 12 months, that's amazing. Well, that's still another 5 or 6 months away, and they've got to supply us. In my view, and the industry that I work in, I actually believe that we will get that much simpler, more accurate, very, very quick ability to test for COVID. And that'll actually be stunningly powerful because if we're able to accurately test very, very quickly and it's uninvasive, not down the nasal passage, and even on tonight's news, they're talking about saliva testing. It's not far away. It's being used in the US and Europe. That's actually going to be one of the greatest tools we've got against COVID as we wait for a vaccine to come on stream. And even if a vaccine is here, we will still use point of care diagnostics. That's the key.
Excellent. I'm going to throw you a curveball while we're talking rugby before I let you go, Greg. Favourite Otago player of all time?
I think it's got to be Ben Smith, actually.
Oh, not a latter or a
well, no, I did go up in the latter era, but I think that Ben Smith just encompasses everything that's cool about Otago rugby. I mean, he's come up through the club system. He's understated. He's just at all class as a guy. I've met him a couple of times, in a social setting, and I just found him. As I said, presents everything that we really like about Otago rugby. We just don't have very many of those types of humans coming out of the district at the moment, Sarah. So we need to try and find them. They'll be here. We're just not getting them on the list.
This is Sarah's Country.